was a typical Friday evening. The city buzzed with the energy of people rushing to start their weekends, but I craved solitude after a draining week. Seeking tranquility, I ventured into a less populated area of the park, where the only sounds were the rustling leaves and distant laughter. That's when I first saw him, a man standing in the shadows, his face barely visible before a chilling wide smile. I quickened my pace, attributing my unease to the late hour and my overactive imagination. Yet as I glanced back, my heart skipped a beat. He was following me, maintaining a constant distance, his smile unwavering. Panic set in. This couldn't be happening. In a crowded city like ours, tales of stalkers and sinister figures felt like urban myths. Yet here I was, living a nightmare. I turned onto a busier street, hoping to lose him amidst the crowd. For a moment, I thought I had succeeded, but as I dared another look, there he was. That smile, that eerie, haunting smile, seemed to mock my attempts to escape. Desperate, I ducked into a small cafe, the warmth and chatter inside offering a temporary sanctuary. I found a table near the back, my eyes darting to the entrance every few seconds. He didn't follow me inside, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. After what felt like hours, I mustered the courage to leave, convincing myself it was all in my head. The night air was brisk as I stepped outside, a stark reminder of my vulnerability. I decided to take a cab home, dismissing the idea of walking any further. Yet fate had a cruel twist in store. As I waited for my ride, I felt a presence behind me. Turning slowly, my worst fears were confirmed. It was him, the man with the insidious smile. He didn't say a word, didn't make a move, just stood there smiling, as if enjoying a private joke at my expense. It was then I realized he wasn't just any stalker. He was toying with me, fending off my fear. This wasn't about robbery or a random act of violence. This was personal, a psychological game meant to break me. The taxi arrived not a moment too soon, and I practically threw myself inside, urging the driver to leave immediately. As we pulled away, I saw him one last time, his smile now etched into my memory, a symbol of pure terror. The ordeal left me shaken, a prisoner in my own home, jumping at every shadow, every unexpected sound. The police were sympathetic, but without a name or a clear threat, they were powerless to help. He was a ghost in the system, a predator playing a sinister game with no end in sight. I share my story not for sympathy, but as a warning. We like to think we're safe, that danger lurks only in dark alleys in the pages of fiction. But evil doesn't always announce itself with ominous music or foreboding darkness. Sometimes it's the man with the unassuring smile in broad daylight, a reminder that true terror doesn't always come from the supernatural, but from the very real monsters who walk among us. It started as a simple errand. I needed to drive to the next town to pick up some medication for my mom. She'd been unwell, and the local pharmacy had run out of what she needed. I didn't mind the drive. It was a clear, albeit cold night, and the roads were mostly deserted. The quiet was a welcome change from the constant hum of daily life. Little did I know the drive would turn into the most terrifying experience of my life. The route was familiar. A straight shot down the highway flanked by dense forest with the occasional deer warning sign. I'd made good time and was on my way back, the medication safely tucked away in the passenger seat. That's when I first noticed the headlights in my rearview mirror. At first I thought nothing of it, another late night traveler perhaps, but as the miles stretched on, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something off about the way they were driving. They were a little too close for comfort, and whenever I changed lanes, they did too. My unease grew when I realized that we were the only two vehicles on the road. I decided to test my theory, signaling and moving into the right lane, then quickly back to the left. The headlights mirrored my movements exactly. My heart started to race. I considered pulling over and letting them pass, but a voice inside me screamed that would be a terrible idea. Instead, I pressed on the accelerator, hoping to put some distance between us. But they kept up no matter how fast I went. That's when panic set in. I was being followed deliberately and with purpose. I thought about calling the police, but my phone was dead, left uncharged in my haste to leave. I felt utterly alone, the darkness of the night suddenly oppressive. In a moment of desperation, I took a sudden turn down a narrow, unlit side road, hoping to lose them. My heart pounded as I navigated the twists and turns, but the headlights persisted, always a constant presence in my rearview mirror. The road eventually ended at a secluded parking area for a trailhead with no way out but the way I had come. Trapped, I turned off my engine and lights, hoping they would pass by. Silence enveloped the car, punctuated only by my ragged breathing. Minutes stretched like hours. Then the other vehicle appeared, slowing to a stop behind me. I could see now it was a beat-up sedan, its driver obscured by the shadows. The driver didn't get out, didn't approach me. They just sat there, idling as if waiting for something. In a sudden burst of courage, or perhaps folly, I decided to confront them. I opened my door and stepped out into the cold night air, keeping my hands visible. "Can I help you?" I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. No response. The driver just sat there, in an impenetrable silhouette behind the windshield. Then, without warning, they reversed and sped off the way we had come, disappearing into the night as quickly as they had appeared. I stood there for a long time trying to make sense of what had just happened before the cold drove me back into my car and I made my way home, constantly checking my mirrors. I never saw the sedan again and I never found out who was driving or what they wanted. But that encounter has stayed with me, a haunting reminder of the unknown dangers that lurk in the dead of night, and the chilling reality that sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that could happen to anyone at any time. It was a routine I'd grown accustomed to, catching the bus home after a late night shift at the diner. The city at night had a different pulse, slower yet more alert, and I learned to navigate it with a blend of caution and speed. The bus was usually empty, save for the occasional night owl or weary worker. But one night, that routine was shattered, leaving me to recount a tale I wish were merely the product of an overactive imagination. That evening was unremarkable at first. I clocked out, pulled my coat tighter against the chill, and hurried to the bus stop, making it just as the bus pulled up. I climbed aboard, greeted by the familiar nod of the weary driver, and took my usual seat near the back. The bus was eerily empty, more so than usual. I settled into the silence, earbuds in, but music off, lost in thought. A few stops later, he got on. I noticed him immediately, a man, ragged and unkempt, with a wild look in his eyes. He paid his fare and despite the nearly empty bus chose to sit directly across from me. Unease prickled at my skin, a warning signal from deep within telling me to move, but I was frozen in place, rationalizing my fear as unfounded. As the bus chugged along its route, I couldn't shake the feeling of his gaze drilling into me, even though I never caught him outright staring. There was a tension in the air, thick and suffocating. I decided I'd get off a few stops early and walk the rest of the way home. Anything to put distance between me and this unsettling stranger. But when I pulled the cord from my stop, he rose too, and a jolt of fear electrified me. The doors opened and I stepped out, my heart hammering. I could hear his footsteps behind me, a steady echo to my own hurried pace. Desperate to lose him, I veered off the main road into the maze of side streets that I knew well, a silent prayer on my lips that he would not follow. But the echo of his steps persisted, a relentless soundtrack to my growing panic. I dared to glance back and saw him there, a shadow among shadows, his presence undeniable. I broke into a run, my breath coming in sharp gasps, the sounds of the city drowned out by the rush of blood in my ears. I didn't know where I was running to, only that I needed to escape, to find safety in the light and noise of a place still awake at this ungodly hour. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, the pursuit ended. I emerged onto a busier street, the glow of a 24-hour convenience store up ahead like a beacon. I glanced back one last time. He was gone, vanished as if he had never been there at all. I never took the last bus home again, opting instead for a longer, lonelier walk from a different stop. The memory of that night lingers, a haunting reminder of the fragility of our daily routines as the presence of danger in the shadows we pass by, oblivious until it steps into the light. Elmwood Street was the kind of place where kids played until dusk, neighbors shared recipes, and everyone knew your name. Or so I thought when I first moved in. But beneath its idyllic veneer, a sinister undercurrent flowed. emanating from the house directly beside mine. Its inhabitant, a reclusive man named Arthur Grimes, was the source of whispered rumors and uneasy glances. His presence cast a long shadow over Elmwood Street, a shadow that, unbeknownst to me, would soon engulf my life in darkness. My initial encounter with Arthur was benign enough. A nod across the fence, a muttered greeting. Yet there was something in his gaze, a cold intensity that unsettled me. The disquiet was compounded by the odd noises that would emanate from his yard late at night. Metallic scrapes, thuds, and the occasional flicker of lights from his basement window. Driven by a mix of concern and curiosity, I decided to investigate one night. Peering through the gap in the fence, I caught sight of Arthur dragging what appeared to be heavy, shapeless loads from his house to his shed. The moonlight cast eerie shadows, transforming his actions into a macabre dance. My heart raced, and a voice inside screamed to retreat, but I was rooted to the spot, captivated by the horror unfolding before my eyes. Suddenly, Arthur stopped. He turned as if sensing my gaze, and our eyes locked. A chill ran down my spine. I had been seen. I stumbled backward, fleeing into the safety of my house, my mind racing with terrifying possibilities. The next day brought no relief. Arthur's behavior grew increasingly erratic, his glances through the fence more frequent and menacing. Paranoia crept into my thoughts, every creak and whisper of the wind a potential harbinger of doom. Then came the night that will forever change Elmwood Street. Awakened by the sound of shattering glass, I found myself face to face with Arthur, who had broken into my home. His eyes gleamed with a manic intensity as he brandished a knife, the moonlight glinting off the blade. The chase was a blur of fear and adrenaline. I dodged, weaved, and ran through my own home as if it were an unfamiliar labyrinth, Arthur always a step behind, his breath heavy with anticipation. I managed to lock myself in the bathroom, frantically searching for something, anything to use as a weapon. The plot twist came in the form of an unexpected savior. The police alerted by a vigilant neighbor who had seen Arthur's break-in. They arrived just in time, battering down my door to find Arthur poised to strike. It was over in moments, but the relief that washed over me was short-lived. The investigation that followed unveiled the horrifying truth. Arthur Grimes is no mere recluse, but a fugitive, wanted in several states for a series of brutal unsolved murders. The noises, the late-night activities were all a part of his dark rituals, preparations for his next kill. I was to be his next victim, chosen not for any reason but the unfortunate fact of my proximity. Elmwood Street would never be the same. The tranquility we all had taken for granted was shattered, replaced by collective vigilance. As for me, I was left with the indelible mark of that night, a survivor of an encounter too close, too personal. The realization that danger could lurk right next door, hidden behind the mundane facade of suburban life, was a lesson learned in the most terrifying way possible.